Yeah, thanks a lot for the kind introduction. Indeed, the Journal of Posthuman Studies is something I'm really proud of. Sort of in order to show that reflections, impact of emerging technologies in the various fields, in the arts, in literature, in economics, um, with the background transhumanism, critical posthumanism. This is sort of the field I've been engaged with. I've been dealing with cyborg theory. And yeah, sort of the initially the feedback in academia for a long time was, well, that is not something which we can deal seriously at university. There's not even a journal. You know, how can you even publish something with proper standards, double-blind, peer-reviewed? And so, okay, so I had organized conference series since 2009 on an annual basis, and book series, and established many other things. And then sort of we got together and said, oh, let's establish a journal. There was an enormous interest by various university presses. In the end, we decided to go for Penn State University Press, so it's coming out in print and online as well. And so basically, that might also be a venue, basically, for you, which your doctoral students, you might be interested in publishing. So we've got a wide range of different, where is it? Scholars. So on the one hand, like feminist scholars, Karen Barat, Rosie Braidotti, Luciano Floridi for ethics of AI, very well known. Probably here was often mentioned Julian Savulescu, but also engineers, Kevin Warwick. So it's a broad range of different fields and disciplines. I thought that might be of interest to you as well, or maybe your postdocs, your doctoral students, a great venue to publish sort of something on the great variety of impacts of emerging technologies. I will talk about today sort of on data ownership, really starting with neuroenhancement, but I thought it's sort of an interdisciplinary venue that I thought I really want to highlight some broader implications up until political implications, which seem to be probably the most important question when it comes to digitization in general. It's not many people when they talk about AI in our time, so it's like AI taking over, but in the end, the decisive issue. AI taking over in the sense AI will put us into the super intelligence. I don't think it has any relevance from a practical perspective. But what is really central is the question who owns the data, and this is something I'd like to sort of showing some of the implications which I'd like to highlight as part of that talk. Ritalin, modafinil, Adderall have been considered as neuroenhancement drugs. Oxytocin has been mentioned in the context of enhancing morality by means of biotechnologies. Invasive as well as non-invasive brain-computer interfaces, like devices created by Neuralink, might provide users with capacities which are far beyond what is widely regarded as normal. Auditive, motor, and visual neuroprostheses are additional options for altering neurological capacities. Well-known examples are the use of neuroprosthetic devices for controlling a mechanical hand, typing by means of thinking, hearing by means of cochlear implants, or enabling visions by means of retinal implants. Wearable non-implant sensors to measure brain activity by an electroencephalogram are one option for studying the effects of neuroenhancement drugs. Implanted electrodes are a further possibility for doing so. In all of these cases, various moral challenges arise. Is there a clear-cut distinction between therapeutic and enhancement purposes? Are neuroenhancement technologies morally justified? Does a person become more or less authentic when using neuroenhancement? Do we even create a post-person in that manner? However, the philosophical challenges go far beyond these ethical issues, which have been discussed for a long time. It might be possible to generate new ontological entities by means of BCIs. Can a BCI not only realize an extended mind, but even generate a collective mind? In science fiction films and literature, we've already been confronted with such entities, whereby the Borg in Star Trek are probably the best known example. These and countless other philosophical challenges could be analyzed, reflected upon, and dealt with when thinking about neuroenhancement. In order to actually grasp the complex entanglements between drugs, BCIs, neurological states, traits, and behavior, a detailed digital analysis of the complex interactions between the various factors needs to be made. Individual personal descriptions of their own psychological states are helpful. However, both internal as well as external brain sensors are even more useful for grasping neurological processes. To be able to conceptualize the effects of the various neuroenhancement technologies and to contextualize them, various sensors which generate digital data are needed. And the more digital data correlations are being monitored, which can be realized in this way, the more reliable, precise, and effective interventions can be. Besides using sensors in or at the brain, additional bodily sensors for analyzing other corresponding biometric features are helpful too, like heartbeat, blood pressure, body mass index, blood sugar levels, sport performance, posture, gait analysis, the genetic analysis. The list of biometric features which can be analyzed by bodily sensors is enormous. Tufts University has realized a tooth-mounted sensor already, which can be wirelessly transmit an analysis of one's glucose, alcohol, or salt intake. So you place it on your front teeth. The more biometric digital data can be collected, the more reliable the correlations between neuroenhancement technologies, neurological consequences, and other biometric information can be analyzed. A detailed digital analysis is a necessary prerequisite for realizing precise, reliable, and successful neuroenhancements. However, the possibility for comprehensively collecting digital data, for realizing an inside data analysis only at the beginning so far. Revised anthropology. In the Western cultural history, it used to be the case, at least since Plato, that our human nature rests in an immaterial, quasi-divine spark, which has also been referred to as rationality, rational or personal soul, mind, image or God, autonomy, or free will. It was not part of the material body, but connected to it in a quasi-magical manner. According to Descartes, the connection occurs in the pineal gland. A friend of mine had her pineal gland removed as a consequence of a brain tumor surgery. Hence, she can prove that she's got no soul on the basis of Descartes. In any case, human nature, according to this understanding, was fixed, unchanging, and identical with our essence. Since Spinoza, Darwin, and Nietzsche, our culture has slowly moved away from such an essentialist self-understanding, and the boundaries of who we are have become unclear. Our mind was reinterpreted as an embodied mind, which is part of our body, and which has come about because of evolutionary developments. A decisive developmental step represented a genetic mutation which occurred about 300,000 years ago and which provided us with physiological necessities for developing language. Thus, we became language-enabled entities. According to the traditional story, our capacity for using language is linked to our rational soul. Since 1869, the Catholic Church claims that our rational soul gets connected to our body at the time of fertilization, which, however, is not a Catholic dogma. So instead of being language-enabled for having a rational, immaterial, and autonomous soul, the bodily prerequisites for developing language are the result of a genetic mutation. Then a complex interplay between nature and nurture has occurred, such that language can come about, as well as some genetic rules, general rules how language can be used, which can be called rationality. However, it needs to be noted that there are as many rationalities as there are entities with rationality. As our idiosyncratic rationality is the result of an extremely special interaction between physiology, environment, and experiences. When it comes to our environment, our parents usually play a decisive role when it comes to us developing language. Hence, it can be said that our parents upgrade us or they steer us with rationality by bringing about rationality. So our sort of that rational, my mental features are actually the result of a steering, of an upgrading process. Helmsmen are responsible for steering a ship. The helmsman of a ship in Greek is a Kubernetes. And consequently, our steered organisms can also be referred to as cyborgs, Kubernetes organisms, the steered organisms. That's how we came about as human beings, as in this alternative anthropology. As we developed our language use as part of this process, so it didn't come from outside, from an immaterial spot, but it's a result of a genetic mutation and the complex interplay with our environment. The use of language and rationality is characteristic for Homo sapiens. Hence, it can be said that we've always been cyborgs, whereby our mind is a part of our body, an embodied mind. Further features of our body need to be revised too, as a microbiome has been analyzed, which reveals that our body consists of 39 trillion non-human cells and 30 trillion human cells, whereby the non-human cells are primarily bacteria which can be found in our intestines. In addition, our mind might not only be a part of our body, but our mind might also be external to us. Two different options come to mind. Firstly, our smartphone might count as our extended mind. Someone with a cochlear implant needs to use a smartphone for adapting the program for hearing. A different program is needed when someone is outside in the garden, inside a meeting, or inside at a concert. If the smartphone gets stolen, then the person is unable to hear properly. Hence, this event can be seen as an infringement of someone's bodily integrity. Even so, maybe even the smartphone is part of one's bodily integrity, of who one is as a person. Secondly, a digital avatar can also be seen as part of our body. If the avatar with whom someone identifies strongly gets touched against the will of someone, then this too can be analyzed as an infringement of someone's bodily integrity. Recently, the issue has been addressed whether BCI cannot only realize an extended mind, but also generate a collective mind. Several options can be conceptualized. BCI could come into existence in which the silicon-based parts become dominant and make decisions for acts themselves, whereby the silicon-based mind is a merging of several digital minds. I don't think that we have any good reason for claiming that digital intentionality is a realistic near-future scenario, as no strong reason is available which supports the plausibility of digital intentionality. Neither artificial general intelligence nor superintelligence are near, even though we regularly hear that story sort of from people in Silicon Valley, in particular entrepreneurs, but they basically haven't studied philosophy properly. They cannot think properly, and I don't think one should listen to them, even though there's they're leading figures from Musk and his friends onwards. I dealt with this detail in more detail elsewhere. Logically, both possibilities cannot be excluded. However, no strong reason is present which supports the claim that a digital intentionality can come about soon. All these doomsday scenarios related to AGI, artificial general intelligence, and superintelligence are a great advertisement trick of some philosophers to get into public media, but they have nothing whatsoever to do with any realistic challenges related to AI. Realistic challenges are related to digital data and their ownership. Health data in Europe, USA, and China. Neuroenhancement is concerned with the enhancement of various parts of a nervous system, which includes the brain, spinal cord, as well as the peripheral nerves. The effects of neuroenhancement technologies can be analyzed on the basis of self-observation as well as by means of biometric sensors. And those sensors can directly analyze our neurological system. By relating these data with drug intake, or the BCI stimulation, some significant correlations can be realized. Additional interactions with alternative bodily alterations can be grasped by also considering further biometric data. Thus, a more comprehensive understanding of the effects of neuroenhancement interventions can be studied. So far, only a limited quantity of data gets collected in the European Union. Due to the General Data Protection Regulation, also known as GDPR, privacy regulations concerning medical data are particularly relevant in the European Union. However, recently the EU has realized the importance of collecting at least some health data. Consequently, the realization of European health data space has been decided upon, and that is something which only happened in the spring of this year. I quote, here, the European Health Data Space, EHDS, will be a key pillar of the strong European Health Union and the first common EU data space in a specific area to emerge from the European Strategy for Data. In spring 2024, the European Parliament and the Council reached a political agreement on the Commission proposal for EHDS. It will empower individuals to take control of their health data and facilitate the exchange of data for the delivery of health care across the EU, primary use of data. Foster a genuine single market for electronic health record systems, provide a consistent, trustworthy, and efficient system for reusing health data for research, innovation, policy making, and regulatory activities, secondary use of data. Unquote. However, the following must also be noted. They stress the EHDS will also include opt-out rules for primary use. Member states can offer a complete opt-out from the infrastructures to be built under the EHDS. Secondary use. The text includes rules on opting out that build a good balance between the respecting patients' wishes and ensuring that the right data is available to the right people for the public interest. Quote. These opt-out options are significant, in particular when considering the meaning of digital data in other parts of the world. In the United States of America, the UK, Russia, and China, digital data is protected much less than in the European Union. In the USA, as well as in the UK, big tech companies have the possibility of collecting, selling, and buying data. Some companies have specialized in collecting digital data from early on. Peter Thiel, who's particularly well known in that context, one of the PayPal founders, he founded the company Palantir, and it's a particularly noteworthy case. And his company also offers health and life sciences solutions. His company has collected as much digital data from when it was founded. It was like 20 years ago. Many governments as well as private institutions are clients of Palantir, given that it's been widely accepted that data is the new oil. Even though it must always be highlighted that data is intellectual property, whereas oil is a natural resource. Still, both entities are connected to power, money, and influence. Legal regulations concerning digital data in the UK are also much less restrictive than in the European Union. This has already had some challenging practical consequences. After having developed a successful COVID vaccine, BioNTech intends to work on cancer treatments, and they need personalized digital data for their purposes. As it was impossible to receive the appropriate personalized digital data within the European Union, they decided to open several new centers in the UK for developing an anti-cancer vaccine there, as there the appropriate personalized digital data available and accessible. That already has enormous consequences for the European Union. If it's successful, it has even more significant consequences. Just with respect to money being made, taxes, sort of workforces. So it's just it's extremely, the GDPR is extremely restrictive concerning having access to digital data. Digital data collection is even easier in China, as any company which is active within China is legally obliged to share their digital data with the government. This seems to be by far the most comprehensive method for getting hold of digital data. Hence, it's not much of a surprise that China has overtaken the USA already when it comes to peer-reviewed article publications. And the relevance of digital data can hardly be underestimated. And given sort of, it's extremely, they have so many data already, and it's difficult to catch up with it once you've got a certain head start. And if data is so relevant as if data is in new oil, then we need to take seriously all the implications, and has significant consequences for European Union. So who owns our biometric digital data? What is digital data? How is ownership or intellectual property grounded? What is the connection between privacy and property? Digital data are covered by intellectual property rights. Two different traditions for establishing property rights are particularly relevant. One lies in the overall utility, the other one is related to putting your labor into generating insights. The patent is an intellectual property right. It can be granted for innovative, useful, and non-obvious insights. It can be justified by reference to a Lockean property theory, which connects property to mixing yourselves by means of your labor with something outside of yourself. In the case of initial acquisition of land, what is being dealt with is limited. So if some unowned land, you mix yourself your labor, that's how you acquisition property according to that theory. But in the case of intellectual property, the data can in principle be shared without any limitation. BioNTech was granted a patent for the successful COVID vaccine, which provided them with an intellectual property right over the vaccine, which is valid for 20 years. For a certain period of time, there was a shortage of the vaccine, and BioNTech did not grant some companies in selected African countries the right to produce the vaccine. At the same time, many million people died of COVID. Consequently, in the US, the suggestion was made to waive the patent rights, at least for a certain period of time, in order to save, utilitarian calculation, best overall impact, waive patent right for a certain period of time, then we can save more lives. However, this move might lower the motivation of investors and companies to invest in and work on innovative medical products. So if this uncertainty, if the option is there that a patent right can be undermined, that significantly lowers motivation because the investors, they want to make the money as a consequence of their investment. So in the end, the patent right was kept. So in here, actually, the suggestion came from the United States, but Europe probably also with a motivation because BioNTech was sort of in Germany. They also want to keep the financial framework, but the intellectual motivation, the intellectual reasons were actually quite strong. Privacy rights are connected to intellectual property rights. Some intellectual goods are yours because you are part of them. You and your labor is being mixed into the inside. Taking away these insight is like expropriating yourself. The relevance of privacy rights can be related to intellectual property rights. The second major line of thought for explaining the importance of privacy rights are the possible negative consequences in the form of sanctions, which go along with them. If certain of your digital data are being made accessible, you might have to face sanctions. Sanctions do not just have to be legal sanctions. Moral sanctions as well as institutional sanctions can also be possible. It might not be illegal to live in a polyamorous relationship, but your family might not like it and sanction you for it. It might not be illegal to help someone committing suicide, but it might go against the rules of your institution, which might sanction you for it. Hence, there's a wide range of sanctions which can be conceptualized as a consequence of privacy infringements, but not all of them are legal sanctions. All of the theories can be applied to neurological digital data too. Yet the question remains an open one. Should the ownership reside with individual users, corporations, political institutions, or shared entities? The opt-in option is strongly highlighted in the European Union. In the USA, corporations and tech companies are the central players. In China, political institutions play the central role and have the right to collect the digital traces. These regulations have political, economic, and ethical implications. Medical data are much better protected in the European Union than in the USA or China, but at the same time, fewer digital medical data are available. These data are needed for realizing innovations, developing new treatments, and generating new financial gains. Innovation, financial flourishing, and more taxes can be realized thus in China and the United States. And there's always a trade-off. The situation is getting worse as a significant amount of data is already being collected in the States and China, whereas the collection of digital data has always been made difficult in the European Union. Consequently, much more digital data is already available in these two countries in comparison to the EU. Whether Europe can ever catch up with that is a tricky challenge if data is really so important in the various fields. And I'm not just talking data in a specific field, but like even surveillance over a certain period of time, correlations with genetic data, correlations with lifestyle, with environmental influences. It has already been highlighted before the data is in your oil as it's strongly connected to financial flourishing. First, money needs to be made and only when it can be taxed and spent, and then only then it can be taxed and spent again. In China, the money is spent in the interest of the authoritarian party in order to uphold the hierarchical structures. In the USA, the money goes to the CEOs of big tech companies. In the EU, the GDPR is being upheld, which makes the comprehensive collection of digital data enormously difficult. With the above-mentioned data centers, the EU tries to balance out the challenges which go along with the GDPR, because they all also realize, sort of, in particular for medical use, I mean, the use, but also for other fields, but is enormously important. But it nevertheless upholds a lot of opt-out option and does not address the issue of the quantity of data, which is already much higher in the US and China. And the opt-out option is problematic as it undermines the possibility of comprehensive data collection, which is an element which gets dealt with in China, as in all companies are legally obliged to share their data with the government. Another option could be the offer the opt-out option to all those who are willing to pay for it. However, this leads to social justice issues. If the price for opting out is too low, then many will go for it, which undermines the possibility of realizing a comprehensive data collection. If the price is too high, then it undermines social justice, privacy only for the rich. In any case, it undermines the possibility of realizing comprehensive data collection, a goal which only in China's solution can realize so far. What are further challenges? Challenges come up concerning economic, political, as well as ethical issues. If digital data is the new oil, the US and primarily China will benefit from it. The EU will be the economic loser, not only economic, scientific, policy making. It has an enormous amount of implication. Even though there are some ethicists who affirm the consequence, highlighting that it's good that from now on other countries become financially dominant and that we move to move away from Eurocentrism. Oh no, finally we've got a way, Europe will go down and that will generate global justice flourishing. But that's not these are not implications which I would favor. I'm a European. I want Europe to flourish, as I regard social liberal democratic political systems as better for promoting human flourishing than a libertarian or an authoritarian system. Being economically worse off can also have consequences for the inner security. When people are worse off, either absolutely or relatively speaking, people look for someone who can be blamed. And they usually identify migrants, members of minority groups, or the weak other in general. So economically worse off, and then the middle class will be concerned first, and then they look, the weak others, they are the ones to blame. And that leads to inner tensions. If tensions between these groups get identified, then civil war might even break out. Inner security also depends on the financial well-being of a country. Being an economic loser does not only imply that a region will be worse off, either absolutely or at least relatively with respect to China and the United States, but it also implies that less taxes can be generated, such that money can be spent in the interest of the people. In a democratic interest, social security, infrastructure, unemployment benefits, as well as a universal health insurance need to be paid by taxes. The more money is available in the system, the more can be spent on social securities. A lot of money is needed in order to uphold the functional universal healthcare system. Consequently, not allowing a comprehensive data collection undermines the possibility to support also these social security achievement and social security regulations, which are in a democratic interest, in the interest of the people. It also undermines the possibility of understanding neurological mechanisms and how they can be influenced by neuroenhancement technologies. Financing of healthcare, research, and medical technologies and development of new medical treatments are being undermined if a comprehensive collection of digital data remains a challenge. Something has to be done to prevent the EU from political, economic, as well as a social decline. It also seems legitimate to wonder whether such a decline can at all be stopped given the enormous technological advances in the United States as well as in China. However, Nokia was at their peak when the iPhone was launched in 2007, so they wouldn't have expected a decline at that time. German car producers would have thought that their leading role in the world would get challenged so fast by Tesla and the great variety of Chinese electronic car companies. So some groundbreaking innovations can be a game changer. Still, digital data seem to be relevant in the digital economy that so far is difficult to imagine that an alternative approach. Yet they will come eventually. The question remains how long it will take until they will be realized. One of the suggestions. It seems clear that the EU cannot continue to progress concerning digitization in the way that they have done until now. European companies which produce bleeding-edge technologies need to be realized. A digital infrastructure has to be established which allows the appropriate use of the digital world. Furthermore, financial basis needs to be established which guarantees that our social securities can be upheld, in particular the universal health insurance, which is an enormously wonderful achievement. If you see sort of the implications in the United States, where like 30 million people are uninsured, and they've got an amazing medical technology, so many of the things which cannot be dealt with here in Europe, they can be offered in the United States, only to the ones who have the finances to pay for it. But as a consequence still of so many people being uninsured, the average life expectancy in the United States is like 5-6 years lower than in the European Union, and that shows sort of the relevance of a universal health insurance. It needs to be noted that the average life expectancy is significantly lower in the United States, even though technologies are better, salaries are much higher in the United States, and the average health insurances actually cost much more in the United States than in the European Union. I do recognize that many new medical drugs get developed and are available in the United States, because in order to develop drugs, you also need to have the money. And that's something which actually can be done in the United States. And that's an interesting thought, which also needs to be considered. Also, that's why physicians and sort of healthcare workers in general are paid much better in the United States. However, the average life expectancy is a decisive reason for me why I regard a universal health insurance system as a morally superior. Still, it needs to be kept in mind that health insurances need to be financed. If digital data is the new oil and data is primarily available in the United States and China, then the quality of health insurances in the EU countries will go down too, as the GDPR undermines the possibility of comprehensive data collection. Digital data need to be collected, while the risk of abuse which goes along with access to digital data needs to be minimized. The problem is obviously once you have all the data, and in particular personalized data, if there's human access to it, then humans always abuse their power. So once you've got the access, there's always a possibility to contact individuals and to abuse that information. To guarantee a comprehensive collection of digital data, the government needs to be responsible for it. In addition, I have more trust in a liberal democratic government than in a tech company which is focused on maximizing the financial gain, because of it's in the hands of Meta or in the hands of Google, and even also 23andMe, that was founded by the ex-wife of one of the Google founders, Sergey Brin. What happens in these companies? There's always a possibility I need to have access to the data for security reasons, and that such power can be more easily abused than it's a case within a more political in a institution which is a democratic institution. So consequently, I suggest that digital medical data need to be collected by an institution belonging to the European Union, by a political institution, social liberal democratic basis. An opt-out option should not be available due to the reflections I presented before. It has to be an obligation to share medical data with these EU institutions. However, such sharing should not be seen as expropriation, but rather as a sort of tax or a sort of payment for something which is in a democratic interest. What is in a democratic interest? An increased health span is being identified with a better quality of life by the majority of people. Most people, if they're being asked, we've got a great variety of different concepts of the good. There's probably not one insight, not one element which applies to all persons. However, sort of psychological studies have shown that somehow living longer healthily, that's what most people identify with an increased quality of life. Either it's intrinsically valuable or instrumentally valuable. I think there's a wide range of different concepts which are being identified with the good life. But the increased health span is widely identified with a better quality of life. By having a well-functioning universal health insurance, an increased health span can be promoted. Hence, it's in the democratic interest to have such a health insurance. Yet it needs to be financed. If the collection of digital data becomes a political obligation, then the financial gain from selling depersonalized digital data can be used to uphold and promote a universal health insurance. So instead of to actually have something promoted which is in a democratic interest, so instead of having the data collected in an authoritarian interest in China, or having it collected by a big tech company in order to make the owners richer and richer, establishing proper collection by political institutions in Europe, and then selling the data, but selling the data as a way to pay for the universal health insurance. That would be a proper democratic interest, a proper democratic use of digital data. But of course, that goes along with a lot of different revisions, and it's not so easy to realize. But just a way as an alternative way of thinking about the relevance of digital data. So in China, the digital data being used to promote the political structure of an authoritarian regime. US digital data being used to make the owners of big tech companies richer. If medical digital data in the EU get used to finance a universal health insurance system, then it's possible to actually talk about a democratic use of digital data. It's this element which needs to be taken into consideration when talking about the ethics of neuroenhancement. Digital data are necessary for analyzing, developing, and applying neuroenhancement procedures. And they're also central for finding these newly realized technologies so that the people can use them. Who owns the digital medical data is a central issue when it comes to the ethical challenges concerning neuroenhancement procedures. Many thanks for your attention. I'm looking forward to further exchanges.